All right. Greetings, everyone. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tea Gresh Realty. I am your hostess for this evening. Today's topic and today's meeting is about real estate discrimination. All right. Heute East Mittwoch. Today is Wednesday, August the 13th, everybody. From my understanding, we've been in a Mercury retrograde. So just be on the lookout for certain energies that may try to enter your spiritual realm. I'm going to try to find myself on YouTube. I want to make sure that I'm coming in clearly and that I can be heard, you all. So just a moment. Yeah, I actually went outside and cut the grass when I got back to the house. All right, here I am. Okay, good. So I can be seen and I can be heard. All right, good for me. All right, so let's get into the Fair Housing Act, and we're going to talk about real estate discrimination. So I am going to play this video for you all. Just a moment while I get it pulled up. All right, here we go. Going to hit share and copy. And I want to play this video so you can all see what made the Fair Housing Act come into play. All right, so just a moment, y'all. Thank you so much for being patient with me as I navigate through Zoom because normally I would be on StreamYard, you all. All right, share, and share again. All right. So I think this should work out okay. All right, so let's go ahead and listen in to this video.
The consequences of redlining to many Black and Brown communities across America meant that those communities had the least and the last of everything. So I want to talk about redlining because this is a term you may have heard, but most people don't actually know the history. In 1933, in the midst of America's Great Depression, when unemployment rates were 25% and millions of people were not only out of work, but many of them were houseless, the federal government, under President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, established an agency called the Home Owners Loan Corporation. Basically, it tried to make home buying much more affordable by subsidizing the cost of building and lending such that people would be able to afford to buy for the first time. Millions of Americans participated, except that when the Homeowners Loan Corporation began to issue mortgages, it came up with a scheme to decide which communities were deserving of loans and which ones weren't. They made maps and used a color-coded scheme. Green meant this was a community that you could lend to, and red meant you could not. The basic decision they made was to determine that any community with the presence of Black people or brown people or people who perhaps spoke Italian in certain parts of the country could not receive support from the Homeowners Loan Corporation. This created a system that came to be known as redlining because communities that were deemed risky by the mere presence of people of color, most especially Black people, were disqualified from getting direct support from the federal government to purchase homes. This policy lasted until 1968 when the federal government passed the Fair Housing Act, which made all forms of discrimination in the buying and selling or renting of homes illegal. But the truth is that the legacies of redlining from that moment to the present meant that Black people were subjected to other forms of exploitative lending. A system called contract buying grew up as a way to sell Black people homes on a layaway plan. You made set payments over an extended period of time, but you never owned the home until the very last payment. It was very common for unscrupulous sellers to withhold that final payment in an effort to take back the home from a person who had worked incredibly hard to buy it.
Okay, let's stop right there, everyone. So, as you clearly heard, there's something called redlining, and I think they did an awesome job at explaining who this impacted the most. As you can see, it said it affected Black and Brown families from becoming homeowners, which is why they implemented the Federal Fair Housing Act. And this act took place in 1968, everyone. So I'm going to continue to let him explain the redlining process.
Home ownership has been the most important asset that a typical white family has in order to do simple things like borrow money to send a child to college. But most importantly, they have financial freedom. But for communities that have been subjected to redlining, they didn't have those advantages. Not only that, the very communities that they lived in suffered from divestment, including the lack of grocery stores, the lack of businesses, the imposition of federal highways that often bisected their communities. In every way imaginable, the consequences of redlining to many Black and Brown communities across America meant that those communities had the least and the last of everything. And to this day, the median wages and income of those communities and the financial insecurity that people who live in redlining communities face has long-term health consequences for families, has educational consequences for young people whose schools often don't have the tax basis to give them the same resources that communities that were never redlined actually have. Communities that were
All right, you all. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right there. I think he did an awesome job at breaking down redlining, what that means, and how that structure looked for a lot of melanated individuals. And you all, we still see a lot. Sorry,
where no two moments
hold on one second.
where every detail is intentionally crafted.
Hold on, y'all. Sorry about that. So we still see a lot of these things taking place today. And they find creative ways to do this. If you go to anywhere really in the nation, we'll see gentrification in different areas. They actually, and this was on a documentary by Tariq Nasheed, I'm sorry, Dr. Umar Johnson. So I know there's been some controversy with Umar Johnson not opening the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey School. That does not negate the fact that he did make some really valid points in that documentary. And I know some people take issue with Tariq Nasheed, but that does not negate the fact that the facts remain the same, no matter where it's coming from. What they did was they started building highway structures in the middle of melanated communities to basically disenfranchise the community, to change the infrastructure of the community. There's also something called eminent domain that a lot of people may not be aware of. And eminent domain is when the government can come in and actually claim your property because they feel that it is for the betterment of the community or for the county or for the public. So because they feel that this is for the betterment of the public, they can come in and stake claim to your territory, but they are supposed to offer proper compensation when they do that. And we don't know if any of this was done back then. So I just wanted to bring this to people's attention for those of you who may see in certain parts of communities and towns all across the nation, there are places that are difficult for melanated people to afford. And a lot of this was done through basically oppressive and systematic oppression, okay? Systematic oppression. I'm trying to be careful with my words, but we all can see what's going on out here. So, with that being said, they actually enacted the Federal Fair Housing Act in 1968, which was only 57 years ago. So, that was not that long ago. This is some people have parents around this age, some people have may have grandparents around this age. All right. And I'm going to read to you straight out of the real estate book so that I make sure that I'm accurately quoting the issues that take place in housing discrimination. All right. They made an amendment in the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974, and they added the prohibition against discrimination on the basis of sex. The Federal Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988 added provisions to prevent discrimination based on both mental and physical handicaps or familial status. The addition of the handicap category requires landlords to allow people with disabilities to make reasonable modifications to an apartment at the tenant's expense to accommodate their special needs. For example, a tenant must be allowed to install a ramp or widen doors to accommodate a wheelchair or install grab bars in a bathroom. All right. At the end of the tenancy, the tenant must return the premises to their original condition, also at his own expense. The familial status category prevents landlords from recruiting for adults only in most circumstances. Provisions do exist, however, for elderly housing. So basically, you've all heard of like the senior citizens neighborhoods, the 55 and up communities. Well, even in those communities, they still have a cap on how many people can come into that community that are under the age of 55. So you can actually be under the age of 55 and live in a 55 and up community, but there's a limited amount of people. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay. So in elderly housing, 80% of the units are occupied by at least one person age 55 or older. So in that dwelling, say it's you and your mother, as long as one of you are age 55 and older, you should be okay. So I hope that makes sense. Familial status includes children under age 18, pregnant women, or persons with or in the process of obtaining custody of children. Okay, so let's continue on, you all, because these are very important factors that people need to know. Um, let's keep it going. All right, let's get into blockbusting, everybody. Blockbusting, okay, also known as panic peddling. So listen, it's illegal and defines the practices as for profit to induce or attempt to induce any person to sell or rent any dwelling by representations regarding the entry or prospective entry into the neighborhood of a person of persons or persons of a particular race, color, religion, sex, national origin, handicap, or familiar status. Blockbusting describes the practice of real estate agents attempting to induce owners to list property for sale or rent by telling them that people of a particular race, color, religion, sex, national origin, handicap, or familiar status are moving into the area. Okay? So that is called blockbusting, everyone. If you know of anyone that has a real estate license, that are licensed in the real estate community that are that's doing this, they are actually in violation of real estate law. All right. And then there is another discrimination factor called steering, and I'm going to read that to you as well. Steering is the directing of prospective purchasers or tenants, especially minority purchasers or tenants, toward or away from specific neighborhoods because they belong to a protected class under the Fair Housing Act, i.e., because of their race, color, religion, sex, what's good, NS, handicap, national origin, or familiar status. The, pro- the prohibition against steering falls under the general prohibition of refusing to sell, rent, or negotiate the sale or rental of housing or residential lots. Example of steering include a real estate agent showing a white prospect properties located in areas populated by only white people, showing black prospects properties only in integrated areas or other areas populated only by blacks. And then also showing Polish prospects properties in areas populated only by Polish and showing tenants with disabilities only units in buildings already housing tenants with disabilities. So that right there is called steering. You're trying to steer this prospect or this client to a specific neighborhood or a certain living dwelling. That is illegal, you all. Okay. Um, there's also discriminatory advertising. And so, in case you did not know this, I'm going to read this to you as well. Examples of discriminatory advertising are an advertisement for the sale of a condo unit or rental apartment that contains pictures showing owners or tenants on the property who are of only one race. Okay? An advertisement stating that the owner prefers tenants who are male, college students, or a for sale sign that specifies no Puerto Ricans, or an apartment advertising stating adults only. So that is discriminatory advertising. All right. Refusing to sell or rent housing or refusing to negotiate the sale or rental of residential lots on the basis of discrimination because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, handicap, or familiar status. This includes representing to any person on discriminatory grounds that any dwelling is not available for inspection, sale, or rental when the such dwelling is in fact available. Okay. You all, I know that I went through this when I was younger in age. You all, I was getting my first apartment, and this was my first time. No, I think was it? Yes, it was. I think it was my first time renting an apartment. And I remember going to the leasing office, and there was a certain section that I wanted to live in. So when I went to the leasing office, they told me they had no more units in that section available. So then I had a funny feeling about it, and it really bothered me. So I got my older cousin to call for me, and I think they told her something totally different. They said they had units in that section that were available. And they actually tried to put me and my roommate in another section that was more rowdy. And it's just, I didn't want to be over there. So when I called back and confronted them about it, then they went ahead and changed it and said, oh, yeah, well, we do have a unit available over in that section. So because I was so young, y'all, I probably was like 20 years old. Um, I knew that something wasn't right with what they were doing, but they were practicing real estate discrimination, and they were violating the Fair Housing Act of 1968. All right. And I can only imagine that it had something to do with my age, for one thing, and it could have been color because I'm more brown skin, and my cousin and my roommate was more fair complected, and my cousin was more fair complected than I. So, and they also mentioned color. Color is protected in the Fair Housing Act, you all. So if you ever feel that you are being discriminated against on any of these things that we went over, you have the right to contact the real estate commission and report that. And the burden of proof is actually going to be on that real estate representative, because it's going to look like if you've already taken real estate classes, then you should already know that what you're doing is you're not practicing fairly. So it's going to be on them to prove their point in front of the real estate board if you can prove that you have been discriminated against. So we have to be very careful with these things when we're, speaking to clients, everyone. Let's get into redlining. Even though we just watched the video on that, I'm still going to read to you the definition as it states in the North Carolina Real Estate Principle and Practices, the 8th edition, you all. Redlining describes violation of the Fair Housing Act by lending institutions. Okay, so let's read that again. It's the violation of the Fair Housing Act by lending institutions. So say they give someone a loan and they have it at a certain interest rate, and they're looking at this person's credit, but then someone else has the same criteria, but they give them a higher interest rate with the same type of credit. They're redlining, and that is a violation of the Fair Housing Act. Okay, so before the enactment of the Fair Housing Act, may have circled certain areas on the map with a red line and refused to make loans to people who wanted to buy property in the areas circled. All right. Now, there are ways that they get around this, as we can clearly see in the world. If you just go out here and look at your cities, you can see that certain zip codes look a little different than others. All right. So they're very strategic in moving around these things. The Act prohibits lending institutions from refusing to make loans to purchase, construct, or repair a dwelling by discriminating on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, handicap, or familiar status. In the past, areas were redlined because they were highly integrated or populated by what they call minorities. I don't consider minorities, to be melanated people. So just excuse me if I don't acknowledge that because I don't feel that we are minorities. Today, however, the Fair Housing Act does not limit the prohibition against financial discrimination to the refusal to make loans because of the character of the neighborhood in which the property is located. So let's read that again. Today, however, the Fair Housing Act does not limit the prohibition against financial discrimination to the refusal to make loans because of the character of the neighborhood in which the property is located. Remember, I said they find strategic ways to get around these things. The prohibition against discrimination also applies to individuals by making it illegal to deny a loan or other financial assistance to a person applying. Therefore, the purpose of purchasing, construction, improving, repairing, or maintaining a dwelling, or to discriminate against him in fixing the amount, interest rate, duration, or other terms or conditions of such loan or other financial assistance. Okay. Now, let's get into real estate brokerage services, you all. So, the Federal Housing Act was amended again in 1988. Remember, we went over that earlier. It prohibited discrimination in the provision of brokerage services designed to bring buyers and sellers together to negotiate terms of a real estate sale. And it states that it shall be unlawful to deny any person access to or membership or participation in any multiple listing service. So that's the MLS. So every time your realtor or you have someone sending you properties from the what we'll call the MLS, that stands for the multiple listing service. So we don't base our searches off of Zillow, off of what's another one y'all like to use? Hot pads, home pads, realtor.com. We actually go straight to the multiple listing service because we pay for that. And it's very expensive for us to provide that service to clients. Real estate brokers, okay, organization or other service organization or facility relating to the business of selling or renting dwellings, or to discriminate against him in the terms or conditions of such access. So that means we cannot deny someone access to these things in a real estate transaction. And we cannot do that based on the account of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, handicap, or familial status. All right. The provision of the Fair Housing Act law makes the denial of membership or the imposition of special terms or conditions of membership in any real estate organization on discriminatory grounds illegal. So if like I wanted to become a realtor, they cannot deny me the right or the access to the MLS system based on my national origin, my race, my gender, things like that. Additionally, the refusal of a multiple listing service to accept a property for inclusion in the service or the refusal of a member broker to place a listing in the service on discriminatory grounds is illegal. So like say you want to sell your house and you go to your agent and you ask your agent, "Hey, I would like my house to be listed in the multiple listing service so that my listing has the advantage of reaching thousands upon thousands of agents in this state because everyone that looks at realtor.com is not a realtor. But if that person is represented by a licensed realtor, more than likely they're going to have access to this database and they can present this to their clients, right? So if you deny access to the seller because you're like, no, I'm not going to put your house in there, then you're actually not giving them an even playing field to get their house sold, and that's illegal. The act requires real estate organizations and real estate agents to provide their services without discrimination. Okay. So basically, what we do for one, they say we must do for all. Okay. So that's how that works. You all, let me see how long we've been on here. Okay. I can't really tell how long we've been on here, but I just thought this was an interesting chapter to go over because, there are things that go on and people are not aware that their rights may have been violated, which is why I felt like this was an important topic to cover. All right. Um, let's see here. What else can we talk about? Enforcement and penalties, exemptions. Okay, so for sale by owners, so I want you to understand that for sale by owners are exempted from the Fair Housing Act. Okay, so it says whereas the federal law provides an exemption for a private owner selling his own home without the participation of a real estate broker, the state act does not provide any such consideration. Okay, so the federal law doesn't get involved with a private owner, but the state may get involved. Therefore, the North Carolina law is more restrictive than the federal law on this point. In a for sale by owner transaction, we see a lot of people, FSBO, FISBOs is what we call them. The owner does not have the right to turn away a minority applicant. The state does, however, provide an exemption for the rental of rooms in a home, not a boarding house, occupied by the owner. So basically, you can be exempted from the North Carolina Fair Housing Act because I've seen ads, personal ads, where people will say, I'm looking for a roommate. Preferably, I'm looking for a female, age such and such. They have a right to do that, and it's for safety reasons, okay? Because this is a private unit being rented out by a private owner. So they are exempted from the North Carolina Fair Housing Act in that case. It also says the federal act provides exemptions for the owner of a rental unit of or of four families or fewer if the owner occupies one of the units. So say that you have what do they call these? I'm trying to think of the name of it. I can't think of the name of it, but it's like a townhouse and you live on the other side of it. I don't know why I can't think of it right now. But when you have a unit and you're occupying one of the units, you have a right to discriminate to who you want to rent that unit. And I don't see anything wrong with that because that could be a safety issue as well. All right, the State Act broadens this exemption to include the case in which the owner or a member of the owner's family occupies one of the units. The state also makes a provision for the rental of rooms in a single-sex dormitory, an issue that is not addressed in the federal law. I see nothing wrong with that at all, and I would understand that as well. Okay? All right, let's keep going, everybody. It also talks about the Americans with Disabilities Act, okay? And we did go over that. This act took place in January 26th of 1992, and it specifically protects the rights of individuals with disabilities. A disability is defined as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of the major life activities of a person. Under this law, individuals with disabilities cannot be denied access to public transportation, any commercial facility, or public accommodation. This act covers employers who have 15 or more employees. It also applies to all local and state governments. Public accommodations are defined as private businesses that affect commerce and trade, such as inns, banks, places of education, and daycare centers. Commercial facilities are those intended for non-residential use, such as factories. To comply with this law, public accommodations and commercial facilities are to be designed, constructed, and altered to meet the accessibility standards of the new law if readily achievable. Readily achievable means able to be carried out without undue difficulty or expense. Examples of barriers to be removed or alterations to be made, including placing ramps, lowering telephones, widening doors, installing grab bars in toilet stalls, and adding raised letters on elevator controls. Commercial facilities are not required to remove barriers in existing facilities, all right? And as of March 13th, 1991, all newly constructed public accommodations and commercial facilities must be readily accessible and usable by individuals with disabilities. All right. The Americans with Disability Act is enforced by the U.S. Attorney General. Punishment for violating this law includes injunctions against operation of a business, a fine of up to $50,000 for the first offense, and a fine of $100,000 for subsequent offenses. Be aware that individuals with AIDS, alcoholism, or mental illness are included in the category of people with a mental or physical disability that impairs one or more of their life functions. Very interesting information, y'all. All right. So I just thought that the Fair Housing Act chapter was a very good chapter to cover, you all. If you have questions, comments, or if you have any topics that you would like to go over for real estate on Wednesday with Tanita, please type them in the comment section or hit me up some type of way, and I'll be happy to go over any titles or any subject matters that you would like to go over for real estate. I think we've been on here for approximately 30 minutes, you all. And I just want to say, remember to always be the CEO of your financial future. How do we do that? By creating economic ownership, CEO. How do we become a CEO? By owning real estate and creating and starting our own businesses, you all. We just heard about redlining, how it affected melanated brown and black people. So let's get out here and let's make sure we get involved in real estate. Make sure we become homeowners. Make sure we start owning commercial real estate, starting businesses, right? Because we have been definitely disenfranchised, and we can still see the ramifications of that today. Just take a look around. It's all around us, you all. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching and listening and tuning in. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. All right, this is your real estate queen signing out. Until next time, you all stay blessed. Oh, and please feel free to reach out to me if you know of anyone or if you are interested in buying or selling real estate. I also help with leases, but I'm more of an advocate of buying and or selling real estate. Signing out, you all.